smart enough to win. That's how the story starts. Learning is the edge that sets your work apart. When the stakes get high and the pressure never stops, smart learning in your pocket puts your business at the top.
Welcome to the Learning Advantage, from Insight to Impact, where we're going to show how smart learning fuels real business results. I'm Deb Laurel, and I'm your host. And I'm delighted to have you all with me today, and to have Martine Kalaw. Kalaw, I should have asked, with us, and I'll tell you a little bit about her in a moment. For over 40 years, Laurel & Associates Limited has worked alongside national and international managers to help them successfully manage employees and create and maintain a positive, supportive, and healthy environment where employees want to stay and do their best work. We focus on making lackluster leaders legendary. The purpose of the Learning Advantage, from Insight to Impact, is to discuss how smart learning fuels real business results. In each episode, we strive to deliver actionable strategies, evidence-based design tips, and real-world case studies that show how learning strengthens organizational health, advances sustainability, and drives profitability. And for that reason, I'm delighted to introduce our guest, Martine.
Thank you so much.
Well, I'm happy to have you. Martine is Vice President of Learning and Development at SalesLoft, where she leads enterprise-wide learning and AI enablement strategy. Under her leadership, the organization achieved 80% AI adoption across 800 employees, a 10% improvement in manager effectiveness, and a leadership ENPS turnaround from -10 to +2. With more than 15 years in learning and development and organizational development, Martine has built and scaled learning and development functions for global workforces, designing manager development programs, leading enterprise change initiatives, and delivering learning solutions across geographies and industries, including retail, technology, healthcare, and aviation. Prior to SalesLoft, Martine ran a boutique L&D consulting firm for 7 years, scaling it to support clients across industries, from high-growth startups to enterprise organizations, such as the Ad Council, Wheels Up, Tiffany & Company, Howard Hughes, and the Riverside Company. She was a featured speaker for Sandler Training, LinkedIn, Bank of America, and Cornell University. A recognized thought leader in human-centered AI adoption, Martine holds a certification from Warder in AI applications in people management and has completed Anthropic Academy's Claude 101, Introduction to Claude Cowork, and AI fluency programs. She is a published author of 2 books and a TEDx speaker. And I'm exhausted hearing all of that. So, Martine, welcome.
Thank you so much. That was such a lovely introduction. I appreciate it, Deborah.
Well, I'm still exhausted thinking about all that you have accomplished.
Thank you.
We're going to get right into the questions.
Okay, let's do it.
When you think about learning as a competitive advantage, what does that mean in the context of your organization or your work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, Deborah, I would say that one, learning is not, L&D is not a back office function. It's truly a revenue lever. And organizations that really understand that, and L&D leaders or practitioners that can exemplify that and showcase that are the ones that really help to like drive, really real change and adoption around L&D. So when I think about that, I think of different initiatives and programs where I've been able to tie it directly to revenue growth, right? And really measure and illustrate the impact from the beginning in terms of arguing or making a case for impact. And then in the end, being able to actually measure that. So, a few years back, I worked for a private aviation company called Wheels Up. And I was, driving or running the sales enablement department. And one of the things that came out of the sales certification program, and I'll just kind of describe a little bit about that sales certification program. We went from just using a third-party vendor to come in and lead sales training to our go-to-market teams, to bringing in to creating something that was customized for our salespeople. So the first part of it was being able to incorporate a legal clinic. Right. Our salespeople were having, customers review, sign contracts. So we really wanted them to understand the contracts they were supposed to guide their customers in reviewing and signing. So that was one thing. We wanted them to travel to the customer service center to really understand what the customer service representatives were dealing with after customers have been are part of our program. What are the questions and concerns that they have, so that salespeople could address that in advance of converting them, right? We also, one of the other things that we did was we had them experience the product. So before, my joining and coming up with this program, this certification, our salespeople hadn't actually flown private with our aircraft, right? And then lastly, having them interact with the pilot. So we had them, visit and be part of the pilot indoctrination to an extent. So they got to interact with the pilots and understand, the experiences the pilots had, the perspectives they had, the concerns that they had. So with all of that, it was a pretty robust program, or onboarding, I would say, or certification. What ended up happening was we were able to increase retention. So member retention went up, right, from 87% to 90%. And that had a lot to do with the ramp up time. So ramp up time increased or the ramp up time increased, or speed to contribution reduced. That's kind of how we measured it. And that was a direct KPI, right? And as a result, we saw that, the member retention went up by, 3%, so that was a huge, accomplishment. And there was a way we were able to tie the program itself directly to the outcome. So that's just one example. I have a few more. I'll be really quick around this because I know we have a lot to go through, but I love this question. You mentioned the AI adoption, and this was a program. So last year, when there was a lot of buzz around AI and companies were trying to figure out how are we going to incorporate and bring in AI into our organization. I came up with an AI certification. So I worked with our subject matter experts, our data engineers and so forth, to customize a partly live, hybrid, async and live program for our population. We wanted everybody to go through this. And the goal was, so adoption meant usage of the tools that the company is investing a lot of money for people to use. The worst thing that can happen is when organizations are investing money in these tools and people aren't using them. So adoption, let's use the tools, let's understand the value of using the tools, and let's also engage in peer-to-peer exchange. So knowledge exchange on prompts, what prompts to use to solve problems. And so that was another way of measuring effectiveness or impact, right? And one of the things I'll let the audience know is that in this era of AI, it's being able to measure impact and link learning and development to outcomes is a lot easier, because you can create a persona through AI, a CFO persona, like I have one. So before, when I'm mapping out my project plan, the first question, or maybe the second or third question I ask, Claude, and we're kind of navigating together, is, all right, this is the CFO persona. So let's figure out how do we measure impact so that the CFO is, so that it's seen as a real measurable outcome to a CFO, right? So being able to ask that question and engage in dialogue with AI to figure out, how do we measure impact? How does it tie back to the bottom line, right? How is it a revenue mover or lever in that way? So I just want to encourage our audience, anyone who is an L&D practitioner, to do more of that. And then, the other thing that, we're now doing, so level 2 of AI fluency adoption is Claude Academy. So we just, we're rolling out Claude across the entire organization. So, one of the things that we're doing right now is we're rolling out Claude Academy. It's a 3-part series to support our employees in understanding not just, what Claude is, but what's the difference between using Claude versus the other tools like Gemini or Notebook LM? How do they complement each other? How do we create those connectors? How do we create workflows? How do you even start thinking about what problems Claude can solve, or how you can offload some of those repetitive tasks to Claude, right? And so this 3-part academy is not just about attendance, right? Right now we've got, I think each session has close to 85 individuals signed up, registered. But really what we're going to do, what I want to do in terms of measuring effectiveness is going back, working with our security team and IT team to measure and really look at how many people are actually, of the people that attended these courses, how many people are actually using Claude. And you can you can get a sense of how many people are actually using Claude Cowork. And you can probably pull data to actually see how many workflows are actually being created, right? Agents are being created through Claude Cowork. And so we're able to actually see the impact, the usage, the adoption, the application of the training that we're doing. And at the end of the day, we can start to look at we can start to measure efficiency as well. So because of the number of workflows that are being created, how does that impact or reduce the time that our employees are spending doing repetitive tasks? So these are different ways that we can absolutely measure and link L&D to direct, KPIs or direct outcomes.
That is fantastic. And you anticipated my second question, which was, could you share a specific example where a learning initiative moved from insight to real impact, and how you measured that?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to another example. I've been in this field as you for many years. So another one that I'll share that I think for many of us we're familiar with as far as L&D practitioners, manager development programs. So one of the things that we did, and I take credit for the work that I did around the actual manager development program, but the entire umbrella of the program, the marketing and the branding around that was something that I worked with my counterpart, the VP of Employee Experience. So we came up with this idea of Year of the Manager. So it was really about, hey, managers, you asked, we listen. We are making you one of our priorities. And so this year is about you. Everything is being tailored to you and your needs. So that included, and this is why I give credit to my colleague, we had manager town halls. So we would take the information that was, communicated during the, company town halls and, break it down and tailor it specifically to the manager. So we had another conversation directed to them. We would bring in speakers, motivational speakers, informational speakers to come in and speak to them. So that was one piece of it. But the other piece of it was also coming up and developing leadership competencies that tie directly to our values, our company values, and we're able to support them in, in their learning journey, right? So these competencies, these leadership competencies, were tied into all of the programming that we developed. So there's a direct link between the competencies and the L&D programs. So our managers don't have to try to guess and second guess how they're going to develop or embody these particular behaviors. And then the third thing was the actual manager development program, which we call LEAD, right? And this LEAD program was really designed, it was a 4-month program, and it was really designed to be, true application. So there was a lot of flexibility in terms of it being hybrid, some async learning, but the async learning was really complementary to the live sessions. With the live sessions, there was a lot of flexibility in, signing up and registering, and there were a lot of offerings of sessions. The other thing was our managers were in cohorts. And thirdly, I should actually also mention this part. Our conversion we had 54 managers that went through the program, and the conversion from the beginnings of the program to the end of the program was 90%, right? And so that just shows you the level of interest and the desire that people had to participate in this program. They were placed in these cohorts. And what made the program so effective, in my book, was people's commitment, but also the fact that we involved pretty much the entire organization. So when the kickoff happened, it was something where we aligned it. The kickoff was aligned with, it was a live kickoff. It was aligned with the same timing as the ELT or executive leadership team offsite. So we had the kickoff. ELT was able to join the kickoff with these 54 employees or managers. So that was one thing. Two, when we had these, we broke people out in cohorts, we had monthly capstone, right? Or monthly challenges, which was basically, individuals or, these cohorts had to solve a challenge based on the themes and the concepts of each of that month, right? And they had to present something in writing or a deck of some sort. But what made it interesting and involved the organization was I had our senior leadership team blindly act as blind judges to each of these cohorts. So that brought in, so we've got the ELT involved. Now we've got the senior leadership, that next level. They're involved in judging and evaluating each of these submissions on a monthly basis. So we had a panel of judges. And then, the last part of it was the buildup. So, and they used a scorecard to evaluate these, each of the submissions. And in the end, because there was a scorecard, we were able to assess, who made it to the quarterfinal. So it was somewhat of a competition, quarterfinal rounds, and then eventually semifinal rounds, where again, the executive leadership team, acted as the panel of judges, and our two finalist team were able to present to them in a Shark Tank style to win money, right? And the money actually went into people's pockets in terms of into their payroll and into their their paycheck. So it made for competition. It made for recognition because people got to be seen, and their managers, they were able to present in front of ELT, senior leadership team. The entire organization was involved. The semifinalists, we recorded their presentation, and we were able to share that across the organization so everyone could recognize them as well. So what ended up happening as a result of that, right, was our manager effectiveness went up, right? It went up by 10%. We were able to actually see that in our engagement surveys because the theme and the focus of this manager development program was around coaching, right? Was around coaching, was about having conversations, one-on-one conversations, was about driving high performing teams. And so we were able to see and measure that, the effectiveness of that through the engagement survey. And what we know around, managers is that they can be the conduit to driving performance to driving retention, right? To just driving higher performance and driving motivation and everything else that's, specific to different departments. So that tied directly to, key performance indicators. So that's one example for me where you can actually see, I was able to actually measure the impact of a program or an initiative that I rolled out.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I'm assuming since they were doing projects that dealt with solving problems, that those problems then got solved.
Correct. So there were themes around hiring, right? And addressing or reducing bias. There were themes around feedback. There were themes around, performance conversations and understanding all the nuances and intricacies in terms of, how to navigate performance conversations. All of that, understanding even processes that they weren't necessarily aware of. And so we were able to look at that and see an uptick in terms of people's managers' ease and knowledge around these concepts and just knowing where things lived. I mean, that seems like an obvious thing, but, I find that I'll speak for, myself and my experience in organizations. There's so much information out there that we think is, accessible to our population, and it is, but they don't know where to find it. They don't remember, they don't know where to go. And so being able to, lay things out and walk them through like a map, so to speak, or a roadmap on how to access this information, really, was a game changer for them. And lastly, I would say that it also supported sort of like the back office work, right? So in terms of maintaining newness and, being able to maintain or update information, policies, and so forth between the L&D team and like just the people team in general, we were able to do that a lot more effectively because everything lived in one place. We were able to consolidate information so that way it was accessible to our managers. So even that, in itself just made things a lot more efficient across our team.
Oh, yes. Totally different question.
Yeah.
And thank you for all of those
You're
wonderful
so
examples.
welcome.
That's exactly what people needed to hear.
Yeah, of course.
What do you see as the biggest barrier preventing organizations from fully embracing lifelong learning, and how do you think we can overcome it?
Okay. Do I have to pick just one?
No. Feel free to pick both.
I'll start with this one, Deborah. I would say one is remote work. And look, I'm going to preface that by saying I'm like one of the biggest advocates for remote learning. I think remote work, I think it's wonderful. But I think that the challenge to remote work has been, when we were in office, way back when, it feels like yesterday. I know a lot of organizations are hybrid or fully remote. I could be leading a training workshop and people would hear, there was buzz around the office. People would stop in or, hear the conversation and then have curiosity, would spark curiosity to learning, right? And there would be conversations that would happen and that would percolate into more people wanting to, participate in the next training session. Or Martine, I heard about this workshop. Are you offering it again? We don't have that type of environment like in remote work because we're in silos, we're behind our laptops, right? And so there isn't that conversation, the water cooler conversations, those things aren't necessarily happening. So one solution or just a recommendation that I have is I think that one, need to engage in more micro learning, but insert ourselves in department conversation, team conversations, right? Insert and embed learning in these conversations and present it as a solution to a problem. Identify the problem. So drop in, whether it's a sales team, all hands, go-to-market team, all hands, or it's the customer teams having, their weekly gathering or what have you, drop in, right? I think it's more beneficial for me to drop in, insert myself in that conversation and spend less time. So it's not about allocating an hour or two to training, but it's about allocating enough time to address a problem that they have and offer a solution in a micro, micro type of way, right? So I think this is one of the this can be a much more effective way of, you know, navigating across the organization and showcasing and sharing learning and development throughout the organization. So in another way, so rather than people coming to training, right, it's taking training and, making it more of like a little roadshow where you're dropping yourself in and inserting yourself across the organization. So I think that's definitely one challenge and, solution or offering that I have. Another one is time. I mean, I think this is the one we can all attest to. Nobody ever has time. And I will speak for, in the environment of like a SaaS, software as a service organization, the priority is driving revenue. So people, right, it can be seen as, especially if L&D is seen as more back office and not revenue generating. People are, they're at odds. It's drive revenue or waste time going to a training, right? That's kind of how they see it. When I say they, I'm speaking in general terms here. So I think, one thing is, making sure that when we are communicating any initiative around L&D, link it to revenue, right? Again, being able to focus less on the frameworks and the themes around L&D, because I know that historically, this is what L&D practitioners are good at, is talking about these frameworks and these ideas. I think we need to just simplify it. This is a problem that you have, and this is the solution. This is how it can be resolved through this concept, through this model, right? And just being able to say that explicitly and saying it to the right people, delivering that to that message in the right way. So I think branding is key, right? And I think we can learn a lot from this era of, I like to call it this Instagram era, this TikTok era of tailoring our message in a very similar format, right? The way that we see these TikTokers, presenting information is a way, that's how people are absorbing it. And so we can kind of model that in terms of how we brand and market our programs and our training initiatives.
Wonderful. In your view, what's one outdated belief about corporate learning that we need to let go of, and what should replace it?
Yeah. Okay. For me, I think, look, I tell my team that they don't get any extra credit points for spending hours building and trying to come up with new learning and development concepts or, building curriculum from scratch. We have AI now, right? Look, in the world of learning and development, a lot of these frameworks have existed for forever. Very rarely are we coming up with these new concepts around feedback, around coaching, around, building trust. They sort of exist in the ether. We're not writing a book, right? If we were all writing, books, you were writing a memoir or whatever, a novel, of course, you want to be completely original. But in terms of internal content that you're creating, practitioners creating for their teams, internal organization, spend less time, spend time outlining, what you want your curriculum to look like. Be clear on that objective, that outcome, that change in behavior and that impact, right? Using, leverage, creating a persona through Claude and obtain that and, outline everything, but spend time actually writing a facilitator's guide, writing out the entire course, because AI can do that for you. Now, some people might hear this and go, well, isn't that the job of L&D? Isn't that taking away from the role of L&D? And if you're suggesting that we use AI to create curriculum, couldn't anyone do that? No, the answer is no, because we still have L&D practitioners have discernment around the quality of the information, the quality of the output. So we're still, we're still the experts, and we still need to be. But what I'm suggesting is, rather than spending what would have been 4, 5, 6, 10 hours designing curriculum from scratch, have the outline, get an output, spend more time learning and preparing to deliver the content in the most remarkable way possible. Spend more time building engagement, right? Spend more time marketing and driving attendance. That's where we want to spend time, and spend more time thinking about and figuring out how you're going to measure impact. So historically, again, speaking in general terms, and I'll speak for myself, I used to spend so much time building curriculum and building programs that I had less time thinking about the actual impact, right? When you talk about, looking out, the Kirkpatrick method, level 4 of actually measuring, I never really got there, because I spent so much time just creating the content, building the program. And we know, that L&D teams tend to be much leaner than some of the other teams. So, there are only so many people that you have to actually do all of these things and measure impact, right? And so what ended up happening is, you have this program, and then at the end of the day, you're measuring level 1, 2, and maybe 3 if you're lucky. Who's showing up? What's the feedback? How they're committing to applying the feedback, or what's the impact? What's the application, and how attendees are committing to applying, the learning, but you don't have enough time to actually go back or really think about how you're going to evaluate and measure the impact, right? And so that's what I would say is an outdated belief. And the solution is spend less time building curriculum, right? Like, spend more time outlining it, being clear on the goal, and assessing and evaluating and discerning the quality, and then spend more time looking at the measurements. So that is an outdated belief in my book.
And I think implicit in that is the fact that there are still organizations and people who believe that learning is knowledge. They don't think past about the fact that people need to, if they're really learning it, they have to apply it, because we want behavioral change.
That's right. Learning happens. I always say, like, my indication of a strong learning culture is when learning happens outside of my, virtual workshops or training rooms or sessions. When people come to me throughout the organization, the business, say, Martine, I have this idea, and they're looking to me for as a consultant. They want my feedback. They want, me to guide them and offer them some advice on how to structure learning for their teams. And there's exchange already that's happening. And I'm just kind of like a third party consultant to them. To me, that is an indication of like a real, like, where we were really moving the lever in terms of establishing a strong learning culture.
Amen to that. Yeah. That's marvelous.
Keep them coming, Deborah.
Well, you've answered this in more than one way, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How are you leveraging data, technology, or new learning methods to create more personalized and effective learning experiences?
Yes. So as you mentioned in the beginning, I'm a big proponent of AI, but human-centered AI, making sure that people are at the center of it, and ensuring that, people are reassured that these tools are there to complement them, right? And support them, rather they're not there to replace them. So when I think about, how to, drive data and technology, I think about the AI adaptive tools that I'm using, and platforms, tools and platforms. So one, that I can think around, that I use around content development is Descript, right? So, we really, I really leverage asynchronous learning as well as, live in-person sessions. And Descript is a really great tool. There are lots of other tools out there. That's just one that I use in terms of creating video content. It's one that, you can clone somebody's voice. So rather than, I think about how literally last year, I was looking for our people business partner to, be the narrator of a course that I was doing that, I crafted the course, but it needed to come from them because it was around performance management. And I think about how, I had them record, gave them the script, had them record. It feels so draconian now, but now, we've got tools where literally you can obtain a 50-second recording from somebody and use that and clone that and build like a series of trainings from that. You can build all the training from that. And then also it has that feature of avatar. These avatars are becoming a little bit more sophisticated. So you don't have to take people's time, right? We want to be efficient with people's time in creating content and material, asynchronous material. So being able to use, content development tools is one key way. Another is AI coaching. So there's an AI coaching tool that, I am in the process of, bringing onto SalesLoft for our managers. So this tool, when we think about these manager development programs, after they're done, there needs to be continued learning. And it's really around coaching and, how to have dialogue with your teams, how to motivate your teams, how to drive high performing teams, how to navigate certain conversations. When you have an AI coaching tool where you can drop in all of this information that's custom to your organization into the large language model, and it can live, this coaching tool can live within, your main source of communication. Ours happens to be Slack. So it's like having an executive coach through Slack that a manager can access anytime and get guidance and feedback and suggestions. They can go into a one-on-one meeting with their direct report, have the conversation, get feedback, a summary from the AI coach that says, based on these frameworks that you learned in the lead program, this is what you could have done differently. This is what you could have done better. This is how you should follow up and so forth. And they can also use it on the other end in terms of preparing for these conversations with their, direct reports. So that's another way that, I'm leveraging technology. And the last, I will say is actually second to last is data signals. So our chief security and information officer and I have been talking about how we can interconnect, created, I think through an MCP server, how we can connect the learning management platform that we have, our LMS tool, to Claude Cowork, so that when someone inputs information into AI and it's an indicator of the skills that they need to develop. So then they're automatically fed through the LMS courses that support developing these skills, and then vice versa, because from, these skills that they develop through the LMS, the courses that are pushed out or recommended to them, it can actually be reinforced and added and, fed back in terms of like the measurement and how much they're applying it in Claude or in the AI tool. So this is something we're talking about. We're both geeking out about it. And I'm very excited about this. I think this is a game changer. This is how we really, really can measure impact and effectiveness of learning and development. And the last thing is, I've been taking, AI fluency courses through Anthropic. And what I think is so critical and is important is, the tools are going to keep changing. AI tools are going to, like, by the time, you learn it and next week it's changed, it's evolved. So it's really about understanding the frameworks, right? And Anthropic, in conjunction with, two professors that, worked with them to build these courses, Professor Rick Dakin and Joseph Feller, they came up with this 4D framework. These are competencies that are absolutely integral to that, integral to understanding and navigating AI, no matter how the form, whatever forms they take. And these 4Ds, one is, delegation, description, discernment, and diligence, right? So those are the 4Ds. And so what I think about and what I'm, already planning is, how do I take these frameworks and how do we incorporate them into our competencies, and how do we personalize them? So customize them to our IC, our individual contributor population, and our manager population by defining those behaviors, right? Because delegation is going to look different for a manager versus an IC when interacting with an AI tool. So that's really, what I'm thinking when and just to be clear, when we talk about these 4Ds, these are the frameworks or competencies that would be needed to facilitate, effective partnership with agents, AI agents. So how do you delegate? How do you prompt? How do you create the right and effective prompt for the AI tool, right? How do you figure out in the workflow, where do you own something as a human being versus the AI tool, right? That's really what delegation is. Description is really about defining, being able to write the right description or the right prompt to get the output that you're looking for through AI. That's a skill that not everyone, we can't assume everyone has that skill, right? Depending on the level of management you are, you may have that skill, have a stronger aptitude for that skill than another, someone who's an entry-level manager. So how do we develop these skills? Discernment is being able to assess, evaluate, have judgment on the output. Does this make sense? What Claude is telling me, will I use this, output, right? How do I question this? How do I challenge this? How do I, assess the quality of this output? And then lastly is diligence, right? How do I make sure that there's accountability for that output? And that's in partnership with me and Claude, or me and AI, right? So these competencies can be incorporated into our organizations to whatever extent that we want them to, right? And they have to sit within, the larger framework of all of our core competencies. So how do we embed them? Secondly, how do we then identify and create the behaviors, right, that are associated with these competencies by person or by level within the organization? So I think that is something that, I am, doing right now and focusing right now on, because that will really set the tone for all of the programs, that are to come through L&D.
Wow.
What question do you have?
If you could give one piece of advice to leaders who want to build a true culture of continuous learning, what would it be?
If I could give one advice to leaders who want to build a continuous culture of learning, the advice would be to be vulnerable. I think vulnerability is key. And what I mean by that is, I mean it within the context of even, rolling out and introducing AI to organizations. I mean it in the context of, when we're rolling out any training initiatives, especially leaders. I think adoption has a lot to do with the vulnerability that leadership or leaders offer in saying, look, I don't know these skills myself, or I'm learning too. Or the vulnerability can also mean just, offering anecdotal evidence of how this particular skill that can be obtained from this learning initiative actually changed your life, influenced your work, helped you grow, right? And I can do that ad nauseum. I'm the L&D person. That's what I do. But it goes a lot longer, though. It goes a long way when someone on a leader, like at the leadership level, is able to communicate that and showcase that vulnerability. I mean, we're going back to like 5 dysfunctions of a team, and the conversations around that Stephen Covey talked about, trust, and that that first layer, trust, comes from a level of vulnerability, being able to share that, hey, this is learning is a continuum. We're all learning, right? And I feel like if leaders can offer that a little bit more, just share that, maybe start with that, as we're pushing out learning initiatives and trying to, drive engagement, I believe people are going to be much more receptive. And also, employees want leaders to model the behaviors that they're, professing. They want to see that you're doing it too. And so I am always happy when I see that, someone from the executive level has registered to attend a workshop or, of mine. I am super excited. I thank them and, just appreciate them because that speaks volumes. It shows that, hey, I'm learning too, right? Even though at my level, I'm learning. It's okay to learn. It's okay to not know everything. And I think that's pretty, it's imperative to driving learning forward.
Oh, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
What's one book, resource, or learning experience that has had a lasting impact on you personally?
Okay. What's one book, resource, or learning? I would say that in 2023, as you mentioned in the beginning, I delivered a Sandler keynote to about 800 employees on a playbook on inclusion, a sales playbook on inclusion. And I was 5 months pregnant at the time. And ironically, I doubted myself the entire time leading up to that keynote. So I doubted my credibility. I wondered, would they take me as seriously if they knew that I was pregnant? Should I share even with the steering committee that I was pregnant, or would they think that I was seeking special accommodations, right? So it was just ironic because I was speaking about inclusion in this conversation, an inclusion playbook for, a sales team, yet I was excluding myself from the conversation, right? And, in the end, I got up on stage and I realized that just my presence, my knowledge, my presence, my voice was enough of a qualifier, and what the lesson is for me, the lesson that I learned from that was that, inclusion has to start with internally. Like you have to believe, inclusion has to start internally, and you have to believe and see yourself in the product, the curriculum, the training that you are offering to the audience, right? You have to connect with it. And so that's why it's so important for me that anything that I speak to, speak about, that I'm training on, delivering a workshop on, is something that I truly believe myself, right? Because that's how it carries through and permeates across the audience.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Is there anything that you would like to add?
I would just say that, I think that there's a lot of, I'm going back to AI, there's a lot of apprehension and hesitation, generally speaking, around AI. And I think it's coming from different angles across, organizations. And it also, because there's a lot of, there's a lot of hype and overwhelm. People are feeling very overwhelmed by the speed in which everything's happening. How much do I have to learn? What if I'm left behind in this learning? I mean, I've experienced this myself. I think I experience this every other month. Like I think I grasped AI and the concepts and everything. And then, oh my gosh, something changes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm overwhelmed. Like, I don't know. And I would just encourage everyone to lean in, and leaning in looks like focusing less on the hype, focusing less on, what the future looks like of AI, but more on, application. And application looks like just trying, right? Taking 15 minutes out of your day each day to learn something, to go into whatever AI tool you have and start figuring out how it can offload some of those repetitive tasks that you don't necessarily like doing, right? How it can address some of the problems that you have. And if you're wondering, how do you even get there? How do I even begin to use the tool? Don't be afraid to ask your neighbor, your peer, your cross-functional partner. We're all learning together. Learning is a continuum, especially with AI. So I would say that, I encourage anybody who is on the people team or a learning and development practitioner to lean in, because AI can really be the lever that really, supports us in moving from being a back office, L&D being seen as a back office, task or, work, to really, impacting revenue. And there are so many ways that you can slice that statement, but certainly it can really make that impact and create a lot of efficiency, for L&D practitioners. So I encourage everyone to just lean in just a little bit more. And if you have any questions and you really don't know where to start, reach out to me.
And that leads me to my next question is, how do people get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is a great way to get in touch with me. I have a website, martinekalaw.com, martinekalaw.com. So martinekalaw.com is another way. And I think those are the main ways, as well as LinkedIn. So you can find me. It's the same, Martine Kalaw. The name that appears on the screen is how you can find me, through web search, through social media, and of course through LinkedIn more specifically.
Thank you, Martine. This has been an incredible interview, and the examples that you have shared, I think, are going to resonate for a long time for folks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This was fun.
And I want to thank our listeners for listening in and participating in our conversation. And I hope that you learned as much as I did from today's session. Please join us next week on June 30th as we meet with Essence Russ, who has served in the nonprofit sector in the Seattle-King County area for the past 19 and a half years, serving at-risk youth in foster care, alumni of care, as well as immigrant and refugee families. If you would like to assess the skills of your trainers and managers, please reach out to me on LinkedIn to receive a free assessment you can use. And please remember that Laurel and Associates is always focused on making lackluster leaders legendary, as smart learning fuels real business results. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Learning Advantage from Insight to Impact. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Every lesson, every workshop, every failed attempt you save becomes a map upon the desktop, shows the